let's get things rolling here. Aaron's got some good connection from what it looks like to start things off. So I'm going to go to him first on this one so that we can hopefully capitalize on his greatness. Packers kick things off in our fantasy outlook. Aaron, obvious the biggest chatter with the Green Bay Packers is the loss of Devontae Adams. We covered the Raiders on last show. Now we talk about his former team in the Packers. What does Aaron Rodgers' fantasy season look like without a Devontae Adams there?
Looks like every other fantasy season, in my opinion. Look, he's going to have to obviously find a new number one target, but Aaron Rodgers is going to produce. I think the one thing you might see is this might be more of the Aaron Rodgers we saw from 2 years ago, which I believe it was 2 years ago, where we see a lot more work in the run game, a lot of play action. He's not throwing the ball as much, but he's going to always be super efficient, right? It's Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. In the red zone, he likes to get his numbers, those 1-yard touchdowns that he should just turn around and hand off to Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon. He likes to get those touchdowns for his stats, and he turns around and he throws it instead. So I think the numbers will be there, but you might see the amount of volume go down a little bit. He's probably pushing a back-end quarterback one just because of the situation, everything. He's older, and he doesn't obviously have Devontae Adams. But when you're drafting Aaron Rodgers, you're understanding, hey, I'm still getting a quarterback one. My turnovers are going to be really low, and I have a guy that I can count on week in and week out.
Yeah, right now Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback 10 off the board going in with the 77th overall pick in drafts. So I think that's a fair spot for him. And under the Matt LaFleur system in Green Bay, Rodgers with Devontae Adams for fantasy averages 23 points since Matt LaFleur took over, and without him, Packers are 7-0 without Devontae Adams, and Aaron Rodgers averages 27 fantasy points per game without Devontae Adams. And this is not saying to knock on Devontae Adams, but this is giving people a little bit more comfort, hopefully, to still go out and trust the back-to-back MVP. Go out and trust your Aaron Rodgers, especially at his ADP right now, which is still fair. It is still fine. AJ, Aaron mentioned this with whatever wide receiver Aaron Rodgers ends up enjoying and going to the most this season. We put to rest yesterday the Chiefs wide receivers and ranking them for Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill. Let's do it with the Packers now without Devontae Adams. Rank the fantasy wide receivers in Green Bay.
You know, the other interesting part about that is we talked about how Mahomes wants to spread the ball around this season, possibly. I think that's what you're going to see a lot from Green Bay as well. When I went here to do these rankings, I was tempted at first to put Christian Watson up top. You know, the talent that he has, the explosiveness that we had. But really thinking about it and looking at what Allen Lazard did last year, not astronomical numbers, but efficient numbers. I put him at number one. Last year, 60 targets, 40 receptions, and 8 touchdowns. It's a touchdown per 5 receptions. Like, I'll take that efficiency. So he has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And I think to start the season, Allen Lazard is going to come on very strong. So I got him at number one. I am going to put Christian Watson at number 2. In college, though it was a small school, he showed great numbers. I mean, he averaged 20.4 yards per catch at North Dakota State, and they were a run-heavy team. So when they did strike, they strike hot. But not only is he a deep threat, he's also really good at the slants. He's also really good at contested catches, which can gain the trust of a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who wants to give the opportunity to the receiver to win the ball. After that, I went with the Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers type thing, just to kind of slide in there. And that Amari Rodgers is just like, hey, it's your second year. Either show up or we know that someone else is going to be there. And yeah, I kind of did it for you too. When it comes to Randall Cobb, I mean, that's Aaron Rodgers' guy. They're restructuring contracts to keep him there. But, you know, he's going to be 32, a year older, and is, you know, I'm not going to say a year slower. Who knows? Maybe he and Aaron Rodgers will do the fine wine season type thing. But so that's kind of those are the only ones I really find fantasy relevant. I want to say this about Sammy Watkins because people are probably asking, which you really shouldn't be. I do not think Sammy Watkins is going to be a guy that you want to use this season at all. Maybe watch him on the waivers and see what happens. But we're talking about a guy in the last 3 years has regressed in targets, regressed in yards, regressed in targets, despite being with 3 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, I mean, last year, 27 receptions, 394 yards, 1 touchdown, good for wide receiver 104. That's not something that I'm like, oh, he's with Aaron Rodgers now, I can trust Sammy Watkins again. Couldn't do it with Lamar, couldn't do it with Pat Mahomes. I don't think Aaron Rodgers will be the difference, and that's not a knock against Aaron Rodgers.
And his ADP right now, Sammy Watkins, he's not being drafted. He's not draftable right now, according to average ADP. Average ADP. What a redundant statement that was.
Average draft.
Yeah, exactly. But really though, and you listed it out, and that's actually the exact order that the ADPs are kind of going. Really, it's Allen Lazard is going as the wide receiver 50, and then Christian Watson is going as a wide receiver 53. So it's really close, but Allen Lazard has that edge because of the fact that he's been there with Aaron Rodgers. He was second in the on the Packers last season in yards for receiving behind, obviously, Devontae Adams. But I think this is one of those similar situations to what we talked about last night with the Chiefs, how it's going to be you take your shot on one of these wide receivers, whether it be Christian Watson or whether it be an Allen Lazard. I think you take your shot with them and hope for the best. And similar to what Aaron said last night, is I think you will figure out pretty early who is going to be the guy for the Green Bay Packers moving forward. Now, I will say this is definitely one of those training camps you are going to want to watch for, and really keep an eye on, your fantasy season. People out there who may be new to fantasy or maybe not as experienced as others, your fantasy season starts in training camp, watching how things go, getting you ready for your drafts. Obviously, your drafts should not start until the end of preseason. Training camp is where you need to start doing your research. And in this situation, see who Aaron Rodgers is favoring more throughout camp and throughout preseason. And maybe that's not where you put all of your stock, but that will help you a lot when trying to decide whether you're going to draft an Allen Lazard or a Christian Watson. Aaron, what do you think about the wide receivers in Green Bay?
I like the ranking. I'm not sold on Allen Lazard being a lead guy. I honestly think him and Christian Watson probably have similar numbers this year. But I think Christian Watson's going to emerge towards the end of the year when it really kind of kicks in, matters most. But I think it's safe to say Allen Lazard is the guy to start the year. I am not a believer in Randall Cobb. I don't think he has an impact whatsoever. I would put Amari Rodgers over him. I'd put Romeo Doubs over him. I'd put Sammy Watkins over him if he makes the roster. The only opposite thing I would say is if Sammy Watkins does make this roster, he's going to play a factor until he gets hurt. He is going to be a guy that when he is on the field, he will be probably the guy, but he's probably going to get hurt. So it's hard to trust. He's the most talented wide receiver there with the most experience. And when people forget how good Sammy Watkins actually is because he's never able to stay on the field. But I firmly believe when Sammy Watkins is healthy and playing, that's a guy that's going to make a difference. He's just never been healthy. And unfortunately, and even if it's not like missing games type, not being healthy, it's like lingering issues type health stuff. So I think you'll see him make an impact the first few games, get hurt, and then go into oblivion if he makes the team.
Waiver.
But see, that says to me that he's always going to have those lingering issues. Then, I mean, 3 of the last 4 years, he's played 9 games, and even the year he played the 13 in Kansas City, 673 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he's only had one 1,000-yard season in his entire career, and I know we talked about injury and everything like that.
Understand those offenses, though. You got to understand the fact that playing in Kansas City, he was buying Kelsey and Hill. He was never going to have breakout years in Kansas City. Played in Baltimore, where they didn't throw the ball a whole lot. So outside of really when he has time with the Rams for that 1 year that he just did not play well, It was really about Buffalo. And Buffalo, he was hurt towards the end of that time. His first 2 years, he was right around 1,000 yards. He played well with Tyrod Taylor. He leaves Buffalo after only playing 8 games. He goes to the Rams. He has like a 50% catch rate. It's like, I forgot who his quarterback was at the time, but it wasn't somebody good. And so, no, Jared Goff wasn't the quarterback then.
2016? Sorry,
maybe
17.
it was.
17. Yeah.
Maybe it was. I mean, that explains it. But
on the Google, it's okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, 50% catch rate he had 70 targets, only caught 39 balls. Tells me a lot there. And then you go to the situations where they had established guys. They had guys they already wanted to get involved in the offense, and he kept getting banged up, right? So it didn't help him. And again, I'm not trying to be the Sammy Watkins advocate here because he's been in the league 8-9 years and nothing's happened. I'm just saying the talent level was never a question with him. It's always been about, hey, can you stay on the field? And I don't think it's going to happen. But for 3 weeks of this year, if he's on that roster that first 3 weeks, watch. Sammy Watkins will be the guy with 112 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Oh, that's him.
You know what I mean?
Right there. That first 3 weeks, I'll tell you what, don't draft Sammy. He'll be there on your waiver. Grab him week 1, roll him out for 3 weeks, and then you're probably trade him. Screw somebody over on the rest of your league. Because that's clutch time for him.
Is this the best situation Sammy Watkins has been in his entire career throughout? I mean,
Buffalo.
That's what kills me about it. Like, honestly, I would say Buffalo probably was his worst at this point now. But since then, I mean, the Rams, the first time that, well, I mean, he was rocking with EJ Manuel.
I would say it's Buffalo.
Was the best?
Because he was the number one guy. Those other places, even though you're playing with great quarterbacks, Baltimore doesn't really produce. They had Hollywood Brown. They don't produce high-level wide receiver fantasy assets. Kansas City already produced Tyreek Hill. We've seen their number 2 usually doesn't produce high-level fantasy assets. So when you're talking fantasy situation, when you're the guy, that's the best situation you've been in. And that was in Buffalo when he produced his highest fantasy value.
That was before we were talking about good Buffalo, though. That was wishy-washy Buffalo. I know.
I mean, in fantasy, it doesn't matter.
I know what you're saying. I'm just like looking at it, and I'm just, ugh. Oof.
Let's go on to the running back position here real quick before we move on to the Vikings. AJ Dillon, we've mentioned how I feel like as we progress through this fantasy season, we're starting to everyone on the show. I feel like Aaron, you have, I feel like AJ, you have, I know I have, starting to get more and more liking AJ Dillon's value and AJ Dillon, the player heading into the 2022 season. Is AJ Dillon an RB2 this season in fantasy football? Layup, someone slam dunk at home.
Yes, the easy answer is yes. They're going to rely heavily on both those backs. And with the amount of touches that they're both going to see, Aaron Jones more so in the passing game likely, he's going to score a ton of touchdowns. Green Bay is still a very, very good football team. They're going to win a lot of games still, despite missing Devontae Adams. I know that's a huge name, but it's just a receiver. I shouldn't say it's just a receiver. It's an outside weapon that a team like Green Bay can withstand losing, and they're still going to win games. So, I think A.J. Dillon is a slam dunk RB2. I have him probably in the middle of that RB2 pack with the potential of being a high-end RB2. If, for whatever reason, Aaron Jones does lose more carries than I think, and he strictly becomes that kind of out-of-the-backfield passing threat, A.J. Dillon is going to be a factor, and I'm not opposed. Right now, you look at those backs, and we talk about it all the time. Zeke and Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. If I'm picking one backfield that I said I had to have 2 backs in, and I don't like doing it, but if I had to have both of them, I would take Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon as the guys that I'm taking both of them in and playing them every week. That's how I feel.
I agree. I think with that situation what you have in Green Bay, that's the best situation to where you're going to have both running backs be as productive. And we've talked about it, and AJ, you even joked around about this before when we were talking about ranking the wide receivers. Joked around about saying, can we rank AJ Dillon or Aaron Jones as the number 1 wide receiver? And we've talked about it on the show plenty of times. We actually think that's what's going to end up happening in Green Bay, in turn making AJ Dillon a very valuable asset in the rushing attack at the goal line for this Green Bay Packers team who is going to be scoring points. AJ Dillon he's being drafted right now not as an RB1 or not as an RB2. He's just outside. His ADP has him as the RB26 behind guys like Clyde, who we talked about yesterday, who I'm pretty sure all of us have AJ Dillon over. He's getting drafted behind Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, Elijah Mitchell, J.K. Dobbins. I think you'd have an argument for AJ Dillon against most of those guys, I'd say. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I'd take him over all of those guys, to be honest, except maybe Elijah Mitchell.
Okay. Yeah.
Definitely over Clyde, Breece, and Etienne.
And then there's Antonio Gibson. That might be.
I'm not taking him over Gibson.
Yeah.
I would take him over J.K. Dobbins, though.
Yeah. So that's right around that. That's right around that RB20 range for AJ Dillon, and that's what we're talking about with a ceiling of possibly being a high end RB2, like you said, Aaron. So he might be your steal, one of the steals of the draft, drafting AJ Dillon.